Eu estou muito feliz de ter entre nós, nessa manhã, a Mirjana Roksandic. Alguns a chamam de Mirjana, alguns chamam de marihuana, e nós podemos chamar de Miriam, que é o mais próximo em português do nome dela. Ela é da Cátedra de Pesquisa do Canadá em Evolução Humana, do Conselho de Pesquisa em Ciências Naturais e Engenharia do Canadá, e é professora do Departamento de Antropologia da Universidade de Winnipeg. As suas principais áreas de pesquisa incluem evolução hominídea no Pleistoceno europeu e os rituais funerários entre caçadores-coletores sedentários e semi-sedentários. Ela possui 2 projetos internacionais ativos no momento. Um na Sérvia, com foco em hominídeos escavados em cavernas paleolíticas, e outro em Cuba e na Nicarágua, onde investiga questões relacionadas às práticas funerárias e à continuidade ritual no Caribe. A professora Roksandic é contemplada com vários financiamentos de agências nacionais e internacionais de fomento à pesquisa e é recipiente do prêmio Nelly McGlung da Foundation de Manitoba Woman Trailblazer. Okay? Uma das razões pelas quais eu convidei a Mirjana para vir falar com a gente é que, como uma das áreas de pesquisa dela são os Balkans, e nós, neste momento, também estamos envolvidos com pesquisas no Balkans, achei que fosse uma boa oportunidade da gente conversar eventualmente sobre colaboração nessa área de trabalho. Mirjana is one of the shining stars of paleoanthropology in the world, and I hope you enjoy her lecture. Okay, Mirjana, thank you very much for coming.
Graças, Walter. Obrigada, Walter. Eu falo português pouco, mas não quero falar com coisas importantes em português porque não compreendo tudo alemão. So, I'm going to switch to English because you will understand a little bit better than my Portuguese. The other thing is that I'll try to speak slowly so that we don't rush through all of this ourselves. So this one is forward and this one is backward. Works? Okay. So I'm basically presenting all the results on behalf of my big project team, MIRA. MIRA is also short for Mirjana, so it falls in really well. But it's an acronym for movement, interaction, resilience, and adaptation, which is basically what we study when we study human evolution. And with the focus on Balkans, because early people, they're very important in the early peopling of Europe. We don't know how yet because we don't have very early material from there, but we're looking for it. So this is a very large international team. I have colleagues from Serbia, Canada, Germany, France, USA, Spain, Denmark, name it. But basically it is directed by my Serbian colleague Dusan. It's okay. We're used to all these things. Sometimes they're mowing the lawn very loudly, right? I'm hoping that's mowing the lawn because I've... Yeah, no, that's fine. So anyways, this is basically co-directed by my colleague Dusan Mihailovic, and myself. And he's the one who is the lead archaeologist on the project. And, this is a really project that has been developed by the two of us over the years of working together. So it's not, by no, it's mine. There's also these two guys, they're paleoanthropologists, so that's why they're always in the picture. Okay, so one of the things that when I started in Paleolithic of the Balkans is that it was there a little bit present before, but there was no systematic Paleolithic investigations in the Balkan, and you'll see later on all the arrows always go through the Balkans, but there was no research done on it. And this actually ties into the paleoanthropology, basically as a colonial science, right? Like we've been looking into, areas of the world where, and it's not necessarily because people are mean and want to be colonial as researchers, on the contrary, right? We provide some essential knowledge, but this was the science of the gentleman, who could go out and collect fossils rather than actually go dig in the ground for potatoes or stuff that is very useful, right? So this brought about, lots of problematic things in our field that actually resulted in a little bit of, unethical interpretations, lots of racist interpretations and stuff like that happened over the years, right? And that befuddled the biological anthropology. So when you talk about certain things, nowadays in biological anthropology, you have to put so many brackets around it to explain to people that you don't mean this by that and the blah, 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 because there's so much of the history of abuse and the abuse of science for political means. So, but it is also science that everyone is interested in. Even those people who believe in God creationists and stuff like that, they want to engage with human evolution in a different way, not something that I particularly care about, but they do want to know about what we are coming up with. The other also, it shouldn't be always thinking about our field as being the racist field or as having this racist past, because it contributed immensely to understanding humanity at a higher level of understanding and to dismantling lots of racial thinking, to dismantling lots of thinking that is actually what we do not want to remember very fondly. And essentially, it contributed to understanding of human essential unity, but also diversity. So we do have, lots of grounds where we can be proud of what has been accomplished by this science. But another problem in this science is that it also functions as a, big name, which usually ends up being a Western European or an American name leading the project. And then this big name bias actually has repercussions on publications and paradigms, and mostly on the paradigms. So when I'm talking about this, all of you are familiar with out of Africa hypothesis, but or out of Africa model of human evolution. And so for 30 years, you could not publish anything that indicated that maybe they mixed, that maybe the story is not as simple, until finally geneticists contradicting themselves and said, oh, yes, they actually mixed. So, you have these pendulum behavior of science. Yes, they mixed. Yes, no, they didn't mix. We are different species. We are different lineages. We are not anything like that. It's irrelevant in terms of understanding the process, but it's important in how we actually talk about this process. So, you have to have names, you have to have ideas that you can talk about in order to understand what we're, discussing. But whether you're going to understand human ancestors as different species, or whether you're going to understand them as the members of the same species but different lineages, is really irrelevant to the process. It's only relevant to our way of structuring things in the language that we use. And language, as you all probably know, is not neutral, right? So it is carrying, all the names carry social connotations, and in sociolinguistic, this is like naming is a very important thing because it carries all these social ideas of a group of people. So we'll get to that later. To change the paradigm, you just have to persist. You have to be pushing over and over. You have to have new methods. You have to open new geographic areas for research. And you have to have new kids on the block, like new scientists, the younger generation. It's up to you to actually figure out how to move past those, who do not want any new ideas to percolate into the things. I know you probably fought with persistence of old ideas, Clovis first and stuff. Sorry, Clovis, it's not you. But, like all these ideas that actually needed a lot of push to actually get any kind of new information out there, right? And so, these traditional areas of research, we're all familiar with Western Europe, East and South Africa, which again was developed through colonial Western European kind of research practices. And then we have Middle East, and then now recently we have Denisovans, and whenever you mention a Denisovans, you get a paper in Nature or Science, because they're very popular, but it's a fascinating site and a fascinating place to work, right? So there is in 2019, Cyrene El-Zatari, Chris Bay, and Katerina Harvati organized in 2015, I believe, a symposium that talked about paleoanthropology and fossil hominins from areas that haven't been widely researched and what could be their potential and their relevance for the next generation research. And this is where the Balkans actually fits in. So what is so special about Balkans? Okay, so I have two pictures here. On this one, you can see that, this is how we traditionally look into the maps. And I have to tell you, the maps and how we present maps is not value neutral. What you chose to present in the map and how you focus the map actually has a lot to do with how you focus your research and how you focus your interpretation. Wow. It's okay. And so here we have, this is your standard map of Europe and a little bit of Asia and Africa here. And so what is happening is all these arrows. So potentially in the green, you have a potential move from Africa into Europe at very early Pleistocene, right? Because the earliest hominin that we find in Spain are from about 1.4 million years ago, and we don't have anything of that age in the rest of Europe. Now, when you look at, never mind. Okay, so this is a bigger picture. I just wanted to show you this one first, that when you look into the Balkans differently, you see that the Balkan is at the center of this, not at the center, but it's included in this Eastern Mediterranean area, right? Where you have the Northeast Africa, you have the Near East here, you have Anatolia, you have Black Sea with another trajectory for movement of hominins, and then you have the Balkans. And all this area is connected throughout Pleistocene. So there is no interruption, geographic interruption, or ice age interruption during these periods. Because when the ice age is active, so when the weather is cold, the southern route becomes available because of all these islands become basically next to each other, right? The sea level drops, and then you can have all these islands exposed. When it's interglacials and the sea is high, you can go around the Black Sea and get into Europe or out of Europe at any time, right? So there is no geographic barrier to hominin movement in this. This is why I think this area is important. Okay. Why are you not moving now? Okay, well. No? Next. Stop. Did I press some button? Not working? Ooh, okay. Okay, it moves. Okay, so basically what we talk about Balkans is this area is a potential corridor throughout ice ages. So early Pleistocene onwards, you have possibility of movement of hominids. Also, what I wanted to show you here on this map here is that if you look into the Caucasus and then here in this area, you can also find that hominins, the earliest site in Europe that is very poorly understood, not yet published. It was only published in Quaternary International in 2019, but it is a site for Tamana region in Russia-Ukraine area, and it's just across the mountain from Georgia and Dmanisi, and that site is based only on stone tools, but it's about 2.1 million years old. So, we're now starting to find that the short chronology was very short and the long chronology is getting very much longer. It hasn't been, as I said, it's published very preliminary in Quaternary International. So when you look into the Balkans, all the arrows always go through the Balkans, right? So these red ones are Neanderthals moving eastward. The black ones are modern humans moving out of Africa into the Balkans. I think probably not right away, or maybe in the first wave. And then also moving from Asia into Balkans and then Europe in their second wave of migration, the successful one, the one that actually worked in the end. So this is a crossroads of east to west and west to east. It's also, there are two major communications. There is the one that goes north-west, so it goes from Greece through North Macedonia and follows these river valleys into Danube and into Central Europe. And the other one is that goes from the east, but it hits directly into Danube and goes up to the Central Europe, and that's what is commonly associated with modern humans moving into the Danube corridor, if you remember that. So, and it is also important hotspot of diversity. So what it means is that when you look into current herperofauna, plant, and mammal fauna, 80% of all the animals and plants in Western Europe, post-glacial, are derived from Balkan sources, and only 20% from the refugee in Pyrenean and Apennine Peninsula. And 100% of the Eastern European species are also from that area. So this is like this repopulation after glaciations happens predominantly from the Balkan area. And this is something that our colleagues from Spain have called, So this is one of the areas where we excavated. This is a group of colleagues that were actually in Sićevo Gorge with us during the meeting for the Middle Pleistocene hominin variability. And this is a gorgeous area to work in. And if you notice here, this hydroelectric dam is the first one in Europe that was built by Nikola Tesla to the village of Sićevo Gorge. Was given by him to the village. And the village also has the earliest cooperative, peasant cooperative, like farmers cooperative, and also the earliest art, what is it called when they get together in some place and they just do art, art collective, but they just have it once in a while. Never mind. It's a, No, it's like painters. There's a painters' colony, right? So they come and then they paint for a period of time or do photography or something like that. And that was established in 1905 for the first time in Europe. So this is pretty impressive. This dam is from the end of the 19th century. So yeah, this is in Serbia, in Sićevo Gorge. So this is southern Serbia, and this is the southern route that actually follows the main river valleys from Vardar to Morava. All the names that mean nothing to you, but they're fun. This one is from the other region that I told you, the eastern Serbia, where we have actually the Danube corridor of the movement of modern humans into Europe. So this is a new specimen that we have found like in 2021. Can you stop? No, it cannot stop. Okay, so this new specimen was found in 2021, and when you look into it, it's actually pretty neat because it has all these, it's definitely a modern human by morphology, but it has some of the traits that we normally associate with Neanderthals, like pterygoid, tubercle, and the shape of the gonium. But these, and then we did the DNA analysis. There is no Neanderthal admixture in this one, except for the normal admixture that happens prior to that. And so it's not like it is showing you that morphology can be used to determine admixture. It actually just shows that variability is something that we have to always keep in mind when looking into these things. But it's also interesting because it falls in this time period where we have this Villabruna cluster and the Donji Vestonci cluster in the Gravettian period, and this is a whole other story, which we're not going to talk about today. Okay, so here is the site. So this is our excavations in the south, where we are following this Vardar-Morava corridor, and this is from the excavations in the Nordeste, in the eastern Serbia, where we are following basically the Danube corridor. And you can see Danube here because it's a border between Romania and Serbia in this picture. This is the site that I'm going to concentrate on today. This is Velika and Mala Balanica and Pešturina. So this is a very interesting area. So this is this southern corridor, basically. And these two areas, so these are approximately 3 caves. Then we have some smaller rock shelters in the vicinity of Pešturina. They date from about, 600,000 currently BP to about 20,000 BP. So we have a continuous, record, not continuous occupation, but continuous record of human presence on that. And we have hominins from all of these sites, which is really fascinating. I mean, to me, right? And to Mercedes and Nils. And then this is Pešturina. So this is the first Neanderthal that was actually found in Serbia. And this Neanderthal specimen is very interesting. In about 2-3 weeks, there is going to be a paper by Cosimo Post and, actually his student, but he's the last author. And he's talking about Neanderthal contraction of the population and spreading of the population throughout the Pleistocene. And one of the specimens that was used to anchor that is Pešturina mitochondrial DNA. It actually shows that Neanderthals genetically distributed across their occupation area are very similar, but Neanderthals between different geological times or different time scales are very different. So what we have is bottlenecks, destruction of the population, rejuvenation of the population, and respread of the population throughout the range. So it's really phenomenally interesting. The archaeologists on the project decided that they have most data for Western France, and so most of this actual spread in the late time of the classical Neanderthals is actually happening out of France. But that's a different story. We also have evidence on this tooth that the hominin microbiome, which is also definitely Neanderthal, included bacteria that actually help digest the enzymes in the mouth that help you digest starchy foods. So it's not tubers, grains, like all of these things would have produced high levels of starches, so they have to have an enzyme to break down. So Neanderthals were not the carnivores that they were purported to be. In Velika Balanica, we have an older or early Neanderthal specimen. This is the in situ picture of the find of the maxillary fragment with one tooth, and then we have found another tooth that actually glues back to it in a little bit in a sieve, of course. So what can you do? I mean, this is excavating the caves. It's almost as difficult, or if not worse, than excavating shell middens. Like, life really sucks when you excavate these things. Like, I love excavating in loess, where you see everything and it's all very nice and smooth. But this is chunky and not very easy to excavate. So anyway, so what you see here is Velika means big and Mala means small. And you're going to have lots of Velika and Mala caves throughout Serbo-Croatian speaking world, right? But this Balanica is actually the name of the cave system, right? So this is why this is important. This is I have a picture of the caves here, right? We missed that slide. Okay, I was wondering about missing this slide. So this is, if you see on this picture here, okay. When you look at the picture here, what you're going to see is the quadrant where the two caves are, and these are the looks of the caves now, with their sort of entrances closed for cave diggers. And then also we have the early initial excavations in Mala, and the next to it, the Velika Balanica. So these two caves are, as you can see here, this is the entrance to Mala, and this is the entrance to Velika. And so these two caves possibly meet at the back, but we haven't been able to get rid of the infill and really work out how they're connected. And so in these two caves, when you look into it, okay, did I miss that? They have, sorry about that because I'm getting a little bit confused here. So these two caves cover between 600,000 years ago and 150,000 years ago. And then we have the Spashturina cave, which is 100,000, 110,000 years ago to 20,000 years ago. It's relatively easy to access, but we had to carry Jeff Schwartz and Leslie Ayala when we were visiting. It's a little bit tough to get there, but nothing like you have to hold on to a rope so that you wouldn't slide down. But you can actually just normally access it. And they're trying to build now the access to the caves that would be a little bit easier for visitors. But I'm reluctant to do that. I want the visitors to, really want to go and see it before they actually, but we'll have an interpretative center at the top. So basically, this specimen here is for around 350,000 years ago. We have some new specimens I'll show you later. I want to bug you with details of morphology, but what is really interesting about Balanica is that we have a large combustion structure right in the middle of the entrance to the cave. So this is, lots of stuff is burned, not burned to the point where we can actually talk about a huge fire place going on, etc. But definitely there was lots of burning and lots of combustion, and we have thermoluminescence dates that were on the flint that was burnt from this area, and it's about 350,000 years ago. Then you have the specimens here again. For those of you who are archaeologists, these are very exciting. but they have this non-Levallois technique, or the kina-type retouch that actually dominates in this assemblage, right? But there is lots of really good pieces, very indicative pieces, and this is otherwise known as Charentien. But we are not very happy at using Charentien because it gives it you have the immediate idea that it comes from France into towards the east. However, the dates that we have from Turkey and then Balkans all the way to Central Europe show progression or movement of this type of kina retouch from the east towards the west, right? And so when we actually publish these papers, these sites in Serbia have very strong connection to Karain and Balanica and the Jabrudians, Achaea, Mislia, and Kasem, and then also to Yarimburgas. So these are the sites that have this particular type of Ashelo-Jabrudian typological, but mostly what we find is Jabrudian. So you have a connection between Neanderthals on one hand coming from the west into the east, and on the other hand, the archaeology coming from the east to the west. This is as it stands now as an explanation, but it could be wrong because Neanderthals are in Karain much earlier. We do have a very early Neanderthal signal in some of the material we are currently about to publish. So again, I'm not going to talk too much about it. So these are the upper right M1 or M2, which is broken. We have incisors. We have the lower and upper incisors. We have the left maximal third molar, central incisor. And so these are the new finds. This is from the old, the already published finds, and we have recently published these ones as well. So again, just to show you a little bit of morphology, the teeth, especially the maxillary molars, are very indicative of Neanderthal morphology. Like there is no doubt they plot right into the Neanderthal thing here. They also show some interesting connections between themselves in terms of morphology. This asymmetrical twinned dentin horn and postparacon tubercle, they're both present in both Velika Balanica and Mala Balanica. Peshturin. So here is the thing that actually fascinated me the most when we first found this, and I do have a specimen. I can actually move around the room with you. I can't leave it with you because I'm bringing it to, but it's a printed specimen. These are the 3 printed specimens from 2. One is Peshturin molar, and one is Mala Balanica mandible. So basically, if you look into the Mala Balanica mandible, I'm just looking at the time, we're going a little bit late. So you have this middle Paleolithic that we have in Velika Balanica is up in there. All of this area is basically sterile. And then 2.5 meters below, we found this mandible. So at the time when it was found, we thought it was about 250,000 because of the fauna in that area. But later on, we did some analysis, turned out to be older than 500,000 years ago, most likely. But older than, which then. We did magnetostratigraphy. It is within the normal crone. So it's middle Pleistocene and not early Pleistocene, as that was really cool. But what is really interesting about Balanica is that it is a no Neanderthal trait. So later on, it was published as Homo heidelbergensis sensulata, against my better judgment, but I couldn't argue with the editor. Because Homo heidelbergensis means middle Pleistocene hominin. Sensulato means from anywhere else in the world, like, basically that designation means we really don't know, which was what I designed it first as Homo sp, meaning we really do not know. We need more information. And so what is really important about this one, and actually looks very similar in morphology of the mandibular body to the Manisi, and plots right with Manisi, and in terms of teeth, later on when we studied, it plots with some of the early Middle Pleistocene hominins, which is not surprising, but it also doesn't give us any information about what it is indeed. So, good, I have animation, okay. So when you look into non-metric mandibular traits, okay, so you're going to see the BH1 and
So this is the Homo erectus you're going to find here, the Tican and other like Moroccan specimens. You're going to get here the Neanderthals. So it's not a Neanderthals that go well with school here. But anyways, it's here, far from that Neanderthal part of the ground, and close to Chiaka, which has then been determined to be Denisovan based on the body. See, it's actually mesographically groups.
Just have to wait a bit for the computer to work.
So basically what I'm trying to say is that this mandible is showing lots of primitive traits, primitive meaning, in an evolutionary sense, so non-derived Neanderthal traits, so it's not a Neanderthal. And it's not necessarily Homo erectus. We're seeing the reduction of lutition, and also Homo erectus is a whole other problem of taxonomy in human evolution, because it's really hard to say what is Homo erectus. But it's close to this sorts of source population that came out of Africa around 2 million years ago and spread further. So basically, this brought us to trying to resolve what exactly is a middle Pleistocene hominin and how do we perceive it in terms of human evolution, right? And whether these Middle Pleistocene hominins were at the source of Neanderthals, modern humans, and Denisovans, or whether in the Middle Pleistocene we already have them split into African and Eurasian branches. And it seems now that what we came up with is that African branch is different, and then Eurasian branch splits off, and then eventually produces Neanderthals and what my colleague from France, and his paper is also coming out soon, suggests is that Homo heidelbergensis could be kept, but they could be only kept for the direct ancestors before the last common ancestor between Neanderthals and Denisovans, and that this branch that leads to modern humans separated before. So this is not very problematic. We'll see how it goes. So who was in the Balkans in the Middle Pleistocene? You have a mandible which is 500K and not a Neanderthal. Then you have these Neanderthals everywhere in Serbia, in Greece, and in Croatia. And then you have Epidema. And Epidema is very interesting because you have the earliest reported modern human in Europe that is found, and in Eurasia that is found in Epidema. That's 210. And then on top of that, Neanderthal at 170,000 years ago.
So we believe that.
I think it's a pretty reasonable argument. I'll tell you why. You do have this evidence of a mixture with Neanderthals and modern humans in the genome of from central Germany, So it's from Central Europe. And it demonstrates that actually there was an introgression of African hominids into Neanderthal Denisovan lineage at about 270,000 years ago. What I'm likely to believe and what I'm likely to propose is that these people move much more than we actually give them credit for. And this is something that is coming out more and more research, like we have in China now at 1.7 Luciano, 2 point something in archaeological records. So it is happening, like we are finding all these things. So this is not impossible. The only actual anthropomorphism that human skull has is the position of the parietal, like this upper third or the height of it. And this is what is found in Argentina. It's also something that's found in Moroccan specimen, which has a face, but the face of modern humans is a primitive face. It's not a derived face. It's very much like the Homo erectus face, right? And now that you have also the one from Grandolina, which has the fossa, this brings about like what exactly does a human face look like, and what is a derived and what is a like Homo sapiens specific trait. And you're going to find that there are none, because the only real trait is in the chin, in the face. When you look into the head, the only real trait that separates us from all the others is in the upper part of the maximum breadth is situated at the upper part, and at the deeper transplant. And that's the only reason why I'm likely to believe that the rest of the is so it's a good proposition. The other thing is that when you look into the earliest occupation of the Central Asian Greece, you find that actually, because of all these possibilities of movement, and look at that, like, if you think outlining very nicely, you can have these during the glaciations because of the depressed sea level, and these during around the Black Sea during interglacials because of the ice issues. Okay. So basically what I was trying to see with these things is really not how do they do and when do they actually do, but how many times. How many times do we have these movements from south, from African continent over the Near East into Europe and the rest of Asia, and how often we have these movements eastward from Western and Central Europe all the way to the South Spain and Central Asia, basically, and North Central. So you don't have a lot of movement, and I think that this is the major sort of takeaway from all the research that we did, is that this movement is constant and repeated. It's not one out of Africa. We have tons of out of Africa. We have something out of Europe. There's certainly something coming out of Asia as well. But when you talk about out of Africa, it is there. Like, we know it based on our genetics that we are all originating from African populations, right? And this population experienced a huge bottleneck in coming out of Africa and spreading around the world. So this is not something that we want to contest. But the one thing that actually I think needs to be contested is that before that we had lots of out of Africa, lots of out of Asia. And these admixtures have produced some very interesting patterns. So this was different scenarios. This is how I actually understood the Middle Pleistocene hominid interaction. Then we actually built it a little bit better. I will show you So this is the Bodoenses that we used as the, so Bododar that we used as the holotype because we didn't want to. It fits perfectly because it's 600,000 years old. It's definitely developing this hallmarks of Middle Pleistocene, the African hominids, which is like larger brain and larger teeth. And the predecessor of this specimen also had to be an African from before that era. So we have an Alpha-Contura parietal, which already shows the expansion of the brain, because all the Middle Pleistocene hominids have big brains, small teeth. And this is something that separates them from the previous Homo erectus ergaster. Right? So you have now these big-brained, small-teeth individuals, and these people are coming from the development of, and they're splitting into the Eurasian branch and African branch. We are the African branch, Eurasian branch are the Neanderthals and Denisovans, and possibly, as Montenegro suggests, Montenegro should be resurrected again, although against resurrected old names. But, it's debates to be had. We have to demonstrate that there are similarities in order that it belongs to this. This is the work we are doing currently in Tanzania. There are no giraffes in the Balkans, although there were lions until very late in the 3rd century BC. They still had lions in the Balkans. And there are hyenas in Lebanon. I didn't know that. This is so African of them, really preserving them. But this is in Tanzania. We're working with Professor Bushosi and before, and we are looking at totally, but Megaloba beds, the beds that belong to the Middle Pleistocene part of the country. You want to go there? Contact. We'll figure it out. And then we're also working in the Dutu area because they found the skull in the Dutu, and we're trying to actually contextualize the archaeological. And I can tell you, this is nothing like what you do in Europe or even in Brazil. This is a whole other ballgame in terms of how archaeology is done. Okay. And this is what I was talking about. So here you have the parietal from Alpha-Contura, which is about 850,000 years ago. And what is interesting is that already shows this extension of the brain in the parietal region. And then here you have my interpretation of that slide that I showed you about like this is I drew that slide with all these messy things, right? And then I asked my postdoc Peja to redraw the slide into a meaningful thing, so we came up with it. So you will have early Homo, whatever it is. You have Homo erectus ergaster, again, whatever it is. And then you have branches, right? Here, you're going to have Homo erectus in Eurasia persisting for a very long time, right? You have antecessor in Europe, which we do not know where to place. We're placing Georgicus together with Homo erectus because it's that time scale, and also because they're so very variable in the size of Manisi. So, and then you have the most recent common ancestor here, and that most recent common ancestor is for Eurasian species and for African species. So, in Eurasia, possibly this branch here is for Neanderthal Denisovan common ancestor, which might be Heidelbergians. And this is then Neanderthalensis and Denisovans, which is now differently called, and there are many different possible names for it. But Homo P would be the newest way of calling it, and that will come soon. Okay, so here's Homo bodoensis, which is the ancestor of modern humans, and then modern humans eventually take over. We also have Homo naledi, which is the late survival of basically an Australopithecine from so it's probably derived from something before the early Homo. And then also we have all these resonances and fluorescences, which are not there, and they are, again, the island isolates that we have in Southeast Asia. And basically, in a nutshell, that's it, right? So this is basically what our current research is going to. What I really would like to do is find the whole skull in Alpha and what we're now trying to do is go for early Pleistocene, possible early Pleistocene localities in the Balkans. Haven't been successful yet, but hey, come on. So it is possible that we do have African Middle Pleistocene hominins that are outside of Africa. So first of all, this region here that I was talking about, the Eastern Mediterranean, because it's never gotten isolated, the population there must have been larger and more stable. You don't have a need or sort of evolutionary effect of isolation of Neanderthals in the West, because that could produce a very derived morphology that we come to recognize. And we have something that is called Neanderthal bias. We compare everything to Neanderthals because we know them pretty well, right? And we can relatively easily recognize them. So this is like, this is why these primitive guys here, these primitive guys in the Mediterranean are probably retaining all these traits that are non-Neanderthal, that are primitive and middle Pleistocene, because they don't have to change. They are very comfortable and in a larger population. So biology, doesn't force them into one particular morphology or the other. They're also part of the common area of demographic expansion, because as I told you, this common area of demographic expansion must have been in this area because then it repopulated after the bottlenecks of the glaciation. So this is where these things are. And that's why it persisted in non-direct morphology. So basically, that's it for my story about problems with fantastic thing, it's very nice. I don't think so just stop laughing. Anyway, so basic takeaway is it's really important to open areas of research where there hasn't been much research done, because only that way can you actually build this picture in a reasonable manner. Because if you're constantly looking at Western Europe, East Asia, East Africa, Levant, you're constantly going to get the same picture over and over. So, more finds, more stuff, more variability. How anthropologists really forget variability very well when they think about how to interpret their finds. It's not surprising. 1-2 for one of the richest person in the universe, right? So, that's how it goes. Thank you very much.
Bom, acho que we have some time for questions. Not many, but half of them. So if you want to put any question to Marianne, you are more than welcome. Sir,
Dobar dan, profesorke, hvala puno. Ovo je sve što znam na srpskom. So I will switch to English. I am a linguist working on African linguistics. Yeah, and in African linguistics, there is a long-term tradition of integrating archaeology and genetics and linguistics. And it's just for the sake of curiosity, I would ask, when it comes to the Balkans, we know it's a very interesting region in linguistic terms. So I would ask if, is there this kind of integration of linguistic and archaeological evidence in current research? Thank you.
I mean, I can ask my husband, he's a linguist, so. And
oh, really?
He works with Chavante people in Brazil, so it's so funny. But the point about linguistics in the Balkans is like we have lots of historical evidence. We also have lots of written sources from the classical period and stuff like that. But, and archaeology in those periods very much welcome, but any kind of deeper history is lost in the Balkans because no original populations that inhabited Balkans are present in the Balkans at this time, right? Like nothing from Upper Paleolithic, nothing from up to Bronze Age. Everything is like gone, and then afterwards you have all these historical sources.
Thank you for the talk. It's fascinating. And let me see if I got it right. So if you want to assume that we have Homo bodoensis as the ancestor of the Homo sapiens lineage, then this fossil from Gombury too would be the ancestor of both Eurasian and African lineages that will lead to Neanderthals, Denisovans, and then Homo sapiens. Is that right?
Yes. So when you look into most recent common ancestor of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans, it has to have the hallmarks of development because all of the Denisovans, Neanderthals, modern humans have large brain. So the common ancestor of them all had to have a large or large enough to give rise to expanding large brain in the later hominids. The other thing is teeth. It comes with smaller teeth, right? But this is a little bit of a, difficulty because you have large dentition in Denisovans and stuff like that. But the hallmark, really, the one thing that you can sort of condense this common ancestor into is the large brain. And that's why Melkakontura 1, Gomvora 2 is the key locality. Wouldn't that be nice if we found one there? I mean, not necessarily me, but anyone. Huh? I know. We just have to figure out how to get the funding and go past Team White. I think the problem is mostly the politics of research in Ethiopia. And unfortunately, it's not necessarily guided by Ethiopian researchers. It's Team White basically blocking everyone working from anything reasonable out there, unless he cannot. So it's the big name bias, we have, and big money grants stuff like that is common.
I have another question, a quick one. Are we in a rush? No, okay. So it seems that there are many taxonomic categories that make us very unhappy.
Yeah.
So Homo heidelbergensis was one of them, but also Homo habilis, it's another one.
Homo erectus.
And I see that, Homo erectus as well, many of them. But what I see is that people, they complain a lot about, not having like a proper morphological unit for some of these names. But then when someone proposes something new, a lot of people is very resistant to this change. So I don't know if you have seen, but Ian Tattersall published recently about the Homo habilis and how it's complicated and so on. And we have been now for decades talking about this, but you go to most human evolution courses and they still talk about.
And they will. The problem is twofold. On one hand, you have to deal with people who are basically sticking to taxonomy rules. And there is a reason for that, okay? But it's not always the most salient, like, it's not always the best reason to. Humans are part of the animal world. And in animal and plant world, you can actually change taxonomic rules. And we've been changing the rules of taxonomy over the decades, right? As they first started, because they started as a non-evolutionary terms, right? So you can't really express evolution with the binomial taxonomy of the 17th century, or 18th century, right? So you have to really come up with something else. But the problem is that when you come up with something else, it gets the pushback from the traditionalists. And their main claim is the priority principle is the key thing for understanding, for following up with taxonomy. That's why Homo rhodesiensis, which I refuse to use, is still in their mind the proper term for this African hominin, because we placed cub women into our paradigm. Hippodime, sorry. So the whole problem is that we have learned tons about human evolution since 19th century, but our names are mostly 19th and early 20th century. And so you have a problem of nomenclature. Some of the names are valid, some are invalid and unavailable. So this is another level of distinction. It's almost like a linguistic one and not necessarily the evolutionary or paleoanthropological one. Then you have taxonomy that's associated with nomenclature, which also is reflecting 19th century ideas, okay? And not necessarily what we have learned since. And then you have new finds and new interpretation of these finds, and you have the species concept that is also changing. So what we insist on as a group, like when we published this paper after the Novi Sad conference, is that when you're talking about species, you have to say which species explanation or which species definition you're using, because it's going to be completely different based on that. And also to make sure that you are straight about not using the biological species concept. Because biological species concept, if you put two fossil mandibles, even of the same species, they will never mate. You will never have a fertile offspring out of them. So it just in paleontology, biological species concept is a new, right? It doesn't work. So there are levels of complexity there. And then there is ICZN, which is the International Commission for Zoological Nomenclature, where humans belong. And ICZN is resistant to any kind of change. But what I really think is that we should have a Congress of Morphologists, actually dealing with humans especially, because we do have much more information on hominin evolution than we have on any other animal. We don't really care if the horses are named this or that and how they, but when you talk about human evolution, it has this social level attached to it, and they explain, it's where we come from and how you're phrasing that, how you're moving this into the general public and into students. When you teach human evolution, it's so complex, and you have one semester to teach them in 13 weeks, all of these intricacies. It's a lost game. You have to have some structure to teach them how to think about it and how to recognize when someone is BSing them and when the information they're getting is not correct. And then on top of that, you have media, and media, this changes everything in human evolution. No, it doesn't change everything. It changes a lot of important things, but you failed to grasp the main one. So this is like, where we stand. Like we're really, I think there should be a special commission within the Zoological Commission that will actually deal with the names. And we attempted that with at ABA by having a vote on just suppressing Homo rhodesiensis, just not using them. Well, you can disagree all you want, we can discuss that, but the reason for doing that is that there is no reason to keep it, and it's extremely offensive to use. It's not, Walter, it's not woke. There is a scientific reason not to keep it, and there is also, and if you work with African paleoanthropologists, and then, I had in Ethiopia, they put an exhibit, and they had Homo rhodesiensis underneath the Bodo, and I was like, okay, people, let's get this straight. But the point is, it's not because of that. It's the priority principle actually does not work in very many cases of human evolution, because it is obfuscating matters, and because these priority names were given at a time when very, very little was known, right? And they come from people who were definitely, like Keith was a definite racist. In the opinion of Rhodes, every single black person wants to become white person, which I kind of disagree with, but okay. And then every single white person wants to become an Englishman, because that's the evolutionary goal of humankind, to become Englishmen. I'm like, no, I don't want to become an Englishman. So anyways, just on a side, So, giving a name like that to please a guy who was such an explicit racist, it's not woke. It's just cleaning your ethics. Our branch of science has caused lots of disagreement. So throwing it away throwing the baby with bathwater is not a good idea, because the baby has also produced fantastic results, right? And has brought up all these issues, right? It's brought to the fore the fact that indigenous people are not retarded savages who do not know how to work in their environment. On the contrary, much that, there was abuses and there was stupid things that were written and done, there is this sense that, archaeology, for example, in Cuba, this is the only way to elevate the knowledge of the indigenous Caribbeans and indigenous Cubans to the competent, very well suited, developed, intellectually, et cetera. So this is like anthropology is a mixed bag of heritage. So what you want to emphasize is probably the good heritage that we brought around, the knowledge that people are very competent in their environments, that people are very sophisticated, that all societies are sophisticated, that there is a fantastic unity of both the evolutionary and societal level. And then clean up the crap that built over the years.
I think that changing names would solve it.
No, this is, but changing names is one of the things.
Evidence that changing names or changing expressions would solve the real problem.
I am totally agreeable to that. Because when the name change comes out of ideology, it falls flat. It doesn't solve anything. But you have to also understand that names are a social construct that is built within a society. So and they carry value. They carry emotional and social values that express the value of the society. So changing these values actually can help. It will never produce the change. We have to get rid of the liberal capitalism. Fine, let's start a revolution, but I can't do it myself. I'm not capable enough. And, revolutions are bloody and I really don't like them. So, we have to do something. What I'm trying to think of, and this is something that I was talking to, where's she gone? Oh, there you are. About is that, we have learned a lot about human evolution. We have learned a lot about diversity of human responses to the environment. We have tons of knowledge about survival of different civilizations or fall of civilizations, etc. And now, as archaeologists, can we really use it? How do we change the narrative of the society that is guiding us towards complete destruction of the environment, complete destruction of the other, and complete destruction? So there is a role to be played. Of course, it's not going to change everything. Of course, it's not. But what Jeff Schwartz had the same reaction as you. Like, we can't change the name. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, whatever. And then I talked to him, to all of them. And the one thing that I pointed out is that in the 90s, well, Stringer, here's a different story. You know what he's called in Africa? I will tell you later. Secretary of State. Yeah, so it's funny. But what I really want to tell you is that in the 90s, the Western world believed in their human rights role in the world. They are the proponents of human rights. This is a post-colonial era. We are giving everyone, you are giving. Who are you giving? Why are you the one giving? That's another question. But the problem is that the new world, the world we live in, is not post-colonial. This world is neo-colonial, big time. The science that we practice, while we really have lots of people like myself included trying to fight really to decolonize the science in a proper way. Like I work with my African colleagues, I'm bringing money. Doesn't mean that I'm bringing decisions. We all have our different expertises, and it's in our expertise and our intertwined interests that we're going to find the way forward, or what we are going to study, how to do it, and where to go, right? So our science is still largely neo-colonial. My European colleagues don't even understand the issues. I mean, you worked here, you worked with indigenous groups, you understand issues. But in Europe, most of them don't even realize that there are issues. In 2017, German zoo wanted to put an African exhibition where they would put African humans in it as well, with their huts. I mean, we are talking neo-colonial world that hasn't changed since 50 years ago when the colonies have gotten. So it's really whatever you can do, no matter how minimal, to demonstrate that you are working towards something different, short of revolution. I mean, if you want to start a revolution, I'll be the first one to support you. But again, we can't do this. We can only just try to move the society in a different way. At least that's what I think.
Yes, I agree.
But there you go.
Well, I don't think that changing names.
It's a small thing that, might actually help.
Well, I guess that language conveys a lot of meaning, and the way you express it.
That's ridiculous. Everybody knows that.
So you should know that, Walter.
Walter knows it.
Language, you tend to build things behind it.
Well, you change a bit of the meaning. It's like we do not use anymore slaves. We use enslaved people because...
Yeah. It's a huge difference because so if you...
But I mean, if any name is causing an unnecessary pain in a given group, I think that we should rethink this. But having said that, I have another question, if I may. So it seems that part of the mass of the Homo heidelbergensis was because of the lack of proper chronologies for some of the fossils. Are we advancing on this?
So Homo heidelbergensis is an interesting phenomenon because it has been used in all sorts of different meanings, right? And so it was a name that was resurrected. And it was resurrected, so when it was first given, it was given to a mandible from Heidelberg, which was, sort of primitive looking and blah, blah, blah. They didn't know where to place it. The guy gave it the name Homo heidelbergensis. You had 3 mandibles at the time. Mandible is difficult, though, but there are teeth as well. So it started with that. Then in 70s, our friend Chris Stringer read the article about out of Africa and decided this is it. He's going to build this sort of common ancestor in Africa, but came up with Homo heidelbergensis because that was the name, that was one of the first names for Middle Pleistocene hominins that existed, right? It was prior to even Rhodesiensis. Now Chris insists on using, so he has bought in my Homo heidelbergensis is not what it was. Now he's using Homo rhodesiensis. And I like, before this paper that I published with Chris Bay and the colleagues, Homo rhodesiensis was used 17 times in literature. 17. It's a non-entity, right? So, resurrecting a non-entity is a problematic, especially a non-entity with such a name, is very problematic because it really ruins the understanding of what you're actually trying to convey. We're talking. These names are not God-given. These names are actually a convention between us. And so Homo heidelbergensis became wastebasket term, which means nothing. So, we're still defining, redefining, undefining, blah, blah, blah. Homo heidelbergensis is this and this not. But we still don't have any use for it because when I say to Homo heidelbergensis to my archaeology colleagues, they go like, okay, and then so you mean, and I get, no, I mean something that is eventually going to give Neanderthals. Oh, so, but it's changing, so they cannot be expected to follow that. Can you imagine what is for the general population or teaching it in the classroom? It becomes a real conundrum. We really have to have some means of rectifying and also of reanalyzing, rejustifying names. Okay, keep the names, but have them have a particular meaning. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. And it's a dialogue. Like when we published this, it was not meant to be about Rhodesiensis and ethics. I thought everyone is going to accept that without blinking of an eye, right? Yes. But this was like the one thing that caught their attention, which I thought was the least relevant in the context. We were trying to demonstrate that there is a pre-modern human, pre-sapiens ancestor in Africa that might have moved, like Ceprano could have been also, but if I call it Cepranensis, again, it's an Italian species, so it becomes complicated. This is why priority principle in human evolution is not going to work. Should be abolished. Anyways, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You have a question. Leah has a question.
Yes. I have always asked myself why the Homo sapiens went out of Africa but did not come back to Africa. Because, let me say my full thinking. So I always talk, but why should only be out and then goes everywhere and does not go back to Africa? So this has always disturbed me. But now I have seen something very interesting, because you have shown that because of this teeth, the Neanderthals had the same teeth without genetic mixture. So it seems that the Homo sapiens was living in an ambient where the Neanderthals were living, and they had this tendency to eat something that required these teeth. But then I go a step further, because afterwards you see that the Neanderthals mixed with Homo sapiens. And why they did not come back to Africa? Because that's a very strange thing, that in Africa you don't find Neanderthal genes. Why should be so? Then I came now to this very strange idea that the Homo sapiens from Europe, that mixture with Neanderthals, these Homo sapiens never went to Africa again. Because otherwise, the Africans should have Neanderthal genes also. Why the Africans do not have the Neanderthal genes if all the Europeans had mixed with Neanderthals? So this I have noticed now. I had never thought about this before. But it seems to me that for some reasons, the Homo sapiens in Europe, who mixed with the Neanderthals, decided to stay there and don't go back to Africa. I don't know why.
Okay. Has to do with population demographics. When you have, so why the first movement of Homo sapiens into Eurasia was not very successful, at least not in Europe? It wasn't successful because there was a strong Neanderthal population. So they had no niche that they could fit themselves in. Why it was successful after, so when it first, also the first Homo sapiens that came to Europe in large number that we have in genetics, like, that had mixed with Neanderthals, et cetera, very little of that population actually survived. And at 40K, all of the rest of them are from different source population. So both Neanderthals and modern humans at around 45 to 40,000 years ago actually had a wipeout for some reason that we still don't fully understand. But these populations survived only in genetic traces. Like they do not, like Neanderthals, survive in genes of Europeans and Asians. Why they didn't go back to Africa? Possibly because Africa had its own very strong Homo sapiens population, and there was no direct, a linkage. They went mostly into Asia. So, I don't know.
Okay, now it's time to finish it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presence.
Thanks for having me and for showing its history.
No, yes, you're more than welcome to come here as many times as you want.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, people, thank you very much for your presence, okay?